Trey Meeks. Welcome to Lucid Commons.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm happy to have you here. Tell us who is Trey Meeks?
I was thinking about this morning. I think Trey Meeks is a husband, a father of three humans plus now four animals, a son, one and only son, and a working professional on top of all that, and trying to get better at each one of those roles every day as much as possible.
I love that. I love that you didn't lead with your professional label as we do in American culture. What do you do in your professional life?
Yeah, so professional life is probably 8, 10, 12 hours a day, so it's a valid question. I work in the consulting field. I've been in consulting in one fashion or another for, I guess, about 15 years now, which is wild to say out loud. I could see the gray hair, so it probably makes sense. Yeah, I've been working in a number of different consulting fields for a while. I worked in international organizations. I worked in a variety of American companies, some big four, some not, that do different sorts of things like risk advisory, strategic advising, risk advising, and operations consulting. So I've been doing that for, yeah, quite a while now.
What do you enjoy about that work?
I think what I enjoy the most, and I reflect on, I asked a executive director about this when I came back to the States and started asking, like, what does he enjoy about his life, and what would he be doing if he wasn't doing this? He said that what he really liked about this type of work is that every day is a new sort of problem. We are essentially paid problem solvers. We're sort of like corporate mercenaries in a sort of way, where we go in, we look at a problem, try and diagnose what is going wrong and what is going right, and how do we get more of the right on the table. So it's not, some things are possibly repeatable, but every problem has its own nuance, and I find that really, really interesting.
So you opened with you're a husband and a father, and I'm curious what lessons from those roles in your life have you learned and implemented in your professional role?
Yep, no, it's a very good question. So I think one of the sort of tired jokes that we say in this business is that we are not doctors, we are not saving lives. But one of the things that I reflect on is that the hardest part of this job, we're solving problems. Sometimes they are big, sticky, complex problems with lots of different inputs. But the thing about the job is it's not really the work that is hard, it's the people. This is essentially people problems, and a lot of the solutions is not how do we build a new system or how do we adopt new technology. It's how do we get people who are complicated to do things collaboratively, to like sing from the same sheet of music. So as being a husband and being a father especially, it's a daily constant reminder that it's often not the work that's challenging, it's the people, and that people are complex, challenging creatures that are, have their own needs and have their own reasons, have their own incentives and have their own fears, and that plays out in work and that plays out in life. I think about working with a spouse, working with a partner. Are both very complicated creatures who have decided to build a life together, and you have to navigate that journey together. And there will have to be compromises. There will be different layers of communication or lack of communication, and then sometimes you share experiences and goals, and sometimes you don't. So how do you navigate that all together? Especially with the children, the little humans, we are flawed, complex creatures raising other flawed, complex creatures in a lifetime full of stresses that come from inside and from outside. So it's been probably a humbling journey, if nothing else. It allowed me to really take down my ego a little bit. It's probably easy in a career full of type A folks to always be thinking about that next career goal, that next ego boost. But every day when you're, changing diapers and wiping butts and just trying to get some little thing to go to sleep, remind you that, yeah, you're one person trying to navigate a difficult journey with a lot of complex inputs.
So you have your team of three that you lead at home along with your wife, and then you have a team of how many at work? Yeah.
So at work, this is going to go into one of my anecdotes later. I've recently gone through somewhat of a team and scope change. There's been a large transformation that happened last year, so a lot of things are in flux. I went from being somewhat of a solo contributor or then a manager of one or two while still managing a lot of different people, like work streams and inputs and stuff like this, to now actually being directly managing, I think, 4 or 5 people now. There's some people who are giving me like part of their time. So it's a slightly larger team, very, very junior at a different part in their career than I am. So I say that I have my 3 interns at home that sometimes pop in to my calls, and I have these folks who are junior folks in all across the world. Some are up to 13 time zones away from me, so we have to make sure that we're, delivering together and staying in communication. Previous roles, I've been in charge of teams, I think up to 12, from very, very junior people to very senior people, depending where we were in the work.
Hmm. I want to hear more about leadership, what it's like to lead at home, at work, and what you've learned about leadership. And I want to hear a little bit more too about what you said with all problems kind of coming down to people, right? You're
Yeah.
solving problems in your consulting role, but all problems are really people problems. So, talk to me more about that. Talk to me what you've learned about people in leading people and being led by other people and leading your 3 interns at home.
Sure. I would probably caveat that if my wife heard this, she would probably say she is the leader at home, which is mostly true. But I try and contribute where I can. I think it's been very interesting. I think that as I get farther along in my journey professionally, I can reflect on the lessons I learn from being a leader at home, trying to be a teacher, trying to be a mentor. It's not just that you are responsible for delivering the work, which is getting the kid dressed, getting them breakfast, getting them to school, and then picking them up. You hopefully along the way are trying to teach them how to live this life, how to become a good person, how to develop a good character that is there to make strength for themselves and strength for others. So in some ways, I'd say I try and take those lessons and also apply it to work. The consulting model, at least theoretically, is supposed to be apprenticeship based. You're supposed to be able to take in smart, bright, talented, and driven folks, very junior in their career, and through the process of the work, mold them into a consultant who has the frameworks they need and the drive to really deliver on complex problems. It is meant to be apprenticeship based. There is meant to be learning and development that is part of the puzzle by design. Not everyone really lives that as a leader because we are under so many stresses from so many different angles that sometimes it is easier just to say, hey, let me do this. We have to get this out the door. We have to get it done. Senior leadership wants this yesterday, and we just don't have time to do this right now. When I look at my work, a lot of times it would be easier if I just took it and did it. But then the people that you're supposed to be responsible for are not learning. They are not developing. They are not becoming what they could become, which is not good for them, but in some ways it's also not good for you. The next time that thing happens, the next time there is an urgent deadline, because there always will be, they will still not be prepared for it, and you will have to answer in the exact same way you did before. It's somewhat of a hamster on a wheel. So if you can stop and you can recognize that, you can take a breath and apply, this is meant to be a learning moment, not just for them, but for you, then you really can set them up for success and set yourself up for success, both professionally at home. Obviously, I work with my team members 8 to 10 hours a day. I work with my family 24/7, 365. So you don't always, necessarily live your values the best way you would like to, but you're always trying to get better.
Talk to me about your lucid moment, whether it's
Yeah.
the meta lucid moment, the micro lucid moments.
I was thinking about this, and I really liked one of the prompts that you had put in the welcome packet.
Mhm.
You shared a few lines in the reach out materials that resonated with me. Explore the real, messy middle, growing pains and all, because the courage to find clarity and act on it, the journey, not the destination, is where clarity compounds. The journey is where we find meaning in life. So as I reflect on my career, which often had a lot of unexpected turns, I am not in 2026 where I thought I would be when I started out in 2010. Um, I can see that every one of my experiences, both good and bad, have led me to exactly where I am now, and I think I'm in a pretty good place now. On the same note, all of my teachers, I'd say all my leaders, both good and bad, have helped me shape to become the professional, the mentor, and the leader that I am today, which again I think is pretty decent. Um, I wanted to reflect on learning good lessons from difficult leaders.
Mm.
I've had several hard moments throughout my career, but there are a few times, I'd say moment of clarities, of stepping up or rising to the occasion, that stick out in my mind as turning points that fundamentally helped me grow into the person I am today. The most recent one actually happened not that long ago, and that became the moment, sort of the moment of clarity or the meta moment of clarity that sort of tied all of this together for me. So in consulting, we love to use frameworks. And my understanding and reflecting on this, especially the most recent challenge, pushed me into a framework that now helps me think about all of these experiences and put it together. I guess you could say a framework or a philosophy that makes sense of the whole journey. So I wanted to reflect on those four moments, and then using some words of some talented thinkers that are much smarter than I am, and then show how the four principal virtues of this philosophy of Stoic thought have actually helped me navigate through difficult times effectively.
I'm excited to hear more about that. So, I'm very interested in Stoicism and Greek philosophy. So I'm excited to hear the framework that you've kind of, is this your own creation? Is this something that you've built just throughout reflecting on all these experiences?
I would not take credit for this because this is absolutely the product of a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me and have had probably about 2,000 years to figure it out. This is more the reflection of this sort of awareness I've maybe been dabbling with at different times in my life in different ways, but I think in the present moment where we find ourselves in 2026 has really been very helpful. The ideas of what is in your control, what is out of your control, living your values, reflecting virtue despite your environment. I think all of those things are increasingly relevant in the time that we find ourselves in. So I would not take credit for it, but I think every person who explores this will probably find different things that resonate with them more than others. I think there are like three or four major teachers, and each one of them had their own style, and they had their own circumstances that inflected that style. And some in my learning I resonate with more than others. So definitely wouldn't take credit for it, but like however you apply it is probably your own version and application.
Well, there's creativity in that, right? And in learning from those who came before us and figuring out how it actually applies to your own life and how to learn
Yeah.
from it and practice it. And where do you want to start? I'm curious about like this most recent, this fresh moment of clarity that you were talking about, kind of your meta lucid moment, but wherever you want to start and take us
Yeah.
in your
I
journey.
will look at this. So as I've had a chance to look at this, I've had a chance to actually look at this sequentially, and I think it builds up to the present moment. So I would start with the most distant one, and then build up to the most present one, and how that actually impacted me to put all of this together. So a long time ago, a galaxy far, far away. So about when I came back to the States, I had done grad school in Austria. I had worked at the UN for a period of time, and then eventually, it's a challenging place to build a career. It's a good place to be in the middle or end of your career, but as a junior person, there just was not as much opportunity as there could be. So my fiance, my wife now, and I moved to the States and basically restarted. I had gone overseas to go to a diplomatic school. I had wanted previously to go into American Foreign Service, so going in that direction, learning politics, history, diplomacy, languages, that was my focus. And, you know, adversity comes in many different ways. The Foreign Service test is very difficult to get through. It wasn't working at the time. By the time I took it the last time, I got the results and sort of had to laugh. I said, with my profile, with my skills and stuff, if they don't want me, you know what? It's not even. I did my best. You know, I'm just going to go look at a different pathway. I'll see what I can do, which has worked out pretty fine. Public service does not necessarily pay the best. Private industry pays a little bit better, and then as I mentioned, the current situation, it's a difficult time to be in government. So
Mhm.
I think it worked out pretty well. But we came back to the States and restarted. We were building a life new here as a about to be married and a newly married couple. And a friend of mine had suggested I look into consulting. It's like, you're a smart guy, you like solving problems, just go look into it. So I applied, got in with a very, prestigious, well-respected company. It was not what I had originally thought I was going to be doing. I was doing market development and support and strategic support for this company. And it was in my hometown. Got to stay around family, got to stay around friends. So, it was a good place to start again. One of the challenges I had was the leader at the time um, had a national reputation for being a very difficult person. Very well established, very well respected, delivered a lot throughout his career, but just a very difficult person to work with. There are more explicit terms used for this person, but I'll keep it off. Just difficult. So um, I'll personify this interaction with maybe two quotes. So first and second one are both from a Stoic thinker called Epictetus. He's former slave back in I think about 50 CE. So had a difficult life, and his whole idea was like it's not necessarily the circumstances that impact you; it's how you react to the circumstances. And the two quotes that stuck to me in this are: first, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. And the second one is, how long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself? So with those two in mind, I worked with this leader who had a national reputation for being difficult, for being challenging. He would redline your document 13 times before it was ready. You thought you gave him something good, he'd come back with markup 13 times. His style was somewhat brash and confrontational. He'd been there for a long time, was a partner, this was his company, that kind of stuff. I was tasked with supporting him in his role of market development at this accounting firm, major accounting firm, though I didn't actually have any sort of formal training in accounting. My background was in languages, was in law, was in something completely aside from everything we were doing. And I was working with people who had made their career doing this very technical thing. So definitely a fish out of water sort of experience. I'd been supporting him for about a year and had on several occasions missed the mark on what I
Mhm.
had been asked to do. And he had shared irritation. He shared irritation with a lot of people. Um, I had mixed up, in this specific occasion, I had mixed up two sorts of metrics in a report that had similarities to a more junior person, more inexperienced like me, but could not have been more dissimilar, could not have been further different to someone in a senior position like him who had been doing this for a long time. So he asked me, kind of yelled at me actually, like, how could you make such an obvious, ridiculous mistake? And I spoke to him plainly. I said, this information is obvious to you because you've been doing this for more than 2 decades. I've been working in this field for about a year without the benefit of your deep background, and I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
Mhm.
I don't think anyone had spoken to him like that for a long time with like courage and plain honesty. Been very, everyone else had sort of shrank away and gone off and done whatever. But to actually stand up and sort of like just strongly push back and say, look, this is how it is. How are we going to work this out? I don't think he'd had that experience in a while. So the next day, he reached out to me on a bunch of learnings I could do to get to better understand the technical subject matters. And from there, our relationship actually improved dramatically. Like he praised me in public continuously, and even said it was my work that made the entire region run, which was a bit of an exaggeration, but still, it was kind of cool to see, you
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
Um, so like based on that, I guess one of the principles or one of the virtues I took away from this is courage to speak truth to power, even in the face of likely adversity or hardship, um, is important in living your journey while maintaining your principles. In my case, the courage was recognized and rewarded. It's not always going to be such, but then some reward is external and some is internal. Even if I had not gotten the public praise or the kudos from that, just having taken the moment to stand up for myself was in itself very, very transitional in where I was just as I was going into a different direction that I hadn't gone and expected before.
Mm. How junior were you in your career when you had this moment of courage?
I was probably extremely junior in thinking about it. I had worked abroad for 2 years, still in fairly junior positions, but then coming back and starting over effectively in this new career, I might as well have been, day one right out of school because I had had a master's degree, I had a little bit of professional experience, but none of that stuff was directly relevant to what I was doing. It was relevant enough to get me the interview, to get me into the job, but it was not transferable. And they actually made it very clear, like, okay, you're a fish climbing a tree. Like, that's great, good for you, but that is not necessarily transferable here. So get up to speed very quickly. So I was a complete neophyte. I was completely new at everything I was doing, and I could not have been working with a more senior person at the time. And we were supposed to find a way to work together. So there was definitely room for conflict, and not always good conflict.
Mm. How how did you actually feel in that moment, if you can remember summoning that courage? Because I'm thinking of anyone else who might be so junior in their career and can't even fathom the idea of what you did, right? To be able to speak up for yourself to somebody who is significantly more senior than you. What did it take to actually practice that courage? Or was that like a huge moment for you where you're like, oh, I've got this, and then you like continued to apply that and practice that courage throughout your career? Like what did it actually take in that moment for you to feel like you could speak up for yourself?
I think some of this might actually be by putting yourself in a place that seems to value and recognize that courage, at least nominally, and then sometimes putting it into practice. I say that because what we would say in certain places I've been is live your values. We want to live our values. We say that we value the obligation to dissent. We say that we are advisors. We are not here just to be yes men. We are here to actually do the job and to give good advice. And some part of that job requires courage to be unpopular, requires courage to say, look, I've looked at everything there is to look at. Your conclusion is not the right conclusion, and this is why. It doesn't matter if you have the loudest voice, if you have the brashest attitude, or if you have the most senior title. Like, objective is objective. I don't necessarily know that I internalized that at the time, but some part of me said, what is happening here is not in keeping with what I signed up for. So if this is the equation that I actually signed up for, then I need to know this now. If this is going to continue how it is, then this is not even an environment that I deserve to be in as a person and as a professional. So I think with that in mind, I was able to summon the courage. Like, we are in a situation where we have to work together or we don't. We're going to have to figure this out. And if you do not want to live by the values that we supposedly have to live together, then that is a good piece of information and I can do something with that. So if it had gone a different way, that would have been useful information and maybe I would have taken a different pathway.
Hmm. So courage is one of your core values. Is that something that you try to instill and inspire in your three interns at home and the juniors that you lead at work?
Yes, I would not say that I'm always the best at practicing what I preach. Sometimes when you're a parent, you do go back to because I said so. But hopefully, I've taught my kids and recognized when you do have something to say and it is well reasoned and it makes sense for what we say we live for, then you should not be afraid to say that. You should have the courage to say, you are not living the values and I'm holding you to account. We call it managing up. So at work, I encourage my junior colleagues to manage up, especially up to me. I will not take it negatively as long as it's done constructively. And I try and get my kids to do the same. They're still working on it. Again, some of them have not existed, more than a handful of years, and they're working out the nuances of managing up effectively. But yeah, I would hope that as long as you've established a sort of way we work where we expect to have common traits, we expect to have decency, then you can hold people to account to make sure that they live those values too.
Hmm. Can you think of a time where managing up worked out really well? I mean, you just gave us an example of that. Can you think of a time where managing up did not work out very well and what you learned from that?
I can think of a situation that was actually the most recent one where maybe it didn't work out exactly how I wanted it to. In that situation, not every leader is going to be the most inspiring leader. We're all humans, we're all complex creatures, we all have our own um, needs, and we all have our different ways of responding to stresses. So, in a more recent one, the scope of my work and my position was such that I went into a new position during a period of change. I was very, very excited about. I thought my impact would grow. The number of really cool problems I could look at would be growing, and I was really happy to be again leading a larger team, international, global. It really felt like this is exactly this moment of self-actualization. This is what I signed up for. Everything else before was leading up to this moment. Um, it was a little bit undefined because things had changed in the organization. There was a lot of forming and storming and norming and all this sort of stuff. And it was unclear how my position necessarily differentiated from another position, which was actually more senior than mine. Um, I was told mine would be more on process and strategy. This other person's would be more on like the people dynamics, getting people to collaborate, facilitate those sort of things. But for all good intentions, the reorganization maybe has not gone exactly to plan. And this person, more senior than me, their scope was not necessarily what it could have been. So we ended up having a lot of overlap in the work that we were doing and what we considered our remit, what we considered our scope of work. We had had a number of different sessions on way we work together. How do we split? How do we divide and conquer? How do we not step on each other's toes? We were both very senior at this point. This other person was more senior than me, but we were collaborative. We both respected each other's experience and our ability to deliver high quality work, especially as we had a very, very junior team that did not have that level of experience. And even the joke was sometimes like, hey, frankly, this probably would be a lot easier if it was just me and you doing this rather than having to teach the team how to come along and do it. But as I mentioned before, apprenticeship development is part of the puzzle. So about a month ago, there was a conversation among this senior leader and even more senior leader just to say, look, things are not working out with this entire reorganization. I want to ask for free hand in redesigning this team in the way that I think it needs to be done to reach some of the challenges that we have in place. There are going to be some additional resources coming on, and as a result of this, my scope of work, what I thought was my responsibility, my team, was essentially shifted to then become this other leader's team, and I would be delivering on only a smaller set of priorities, on a smaller set of pillars and work streams. So to me, it felt almost like a demotion. It really felt like, wow, so I'm going from leading all of these things to leading a small amount. I'm not leading the entire team. I'm leading certain people in certain ways, and there are other people being brought in to lead on other things. And I thought, this feels like a demotion. This feels like something I did not sign up for. If this had been presented to me at the beginning, I would not have left my other opportunity to go do this opportunity. This felt like an absolute stab in the ego. Like this was, how could you? I thought we had a good working relationship. How could you go and have a conversation where I was not involved, where I was not consulted, and I even found out about the decision in a very roundabout way? How could you do this? Felt like it was a heated exchange, actually. It was a very uncomfortable, heated exchange to the point that we said, look, we're going to stop this conversation. We're going to take the weekend. We're going to come back to it the next week. And I was very upset. I talked to a couple people I was close with, one who had very much a mentorship relation to me in a previous position, and he basically said, look, this is maybe not what you thought was going to happen. You can vote with your feet, or you could find a way to make this work. You can take the weekend, you can think about it, you can reflect, and you can come back, and you can go this way, or you can go that. And it's maybe not what I wanted to hear at the time, but I think it was very, very wisdom. So the relevant quotes I had from this, two of them again from Epictetus: people are disturbed not by things, but the views which they take of things, and make best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. And then maybe the more interesting one is Seneca: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. So what I got from this, from reflection, is not necessarily on the face of things, actually. What I was now scoped to do was not functionally much different than what I already was doing. It was only my perception of it that had changed because we were very limited. We had a very junior team. And frankly, all we've been able to deliver so far is on the pillars that I was already leading, on the initiatives that I was already doing work on. And we had a constant feeling of stress, like we don't have enough bandwidth to do those other things that really need to be done, and we don't have the time to do it. So effectively, what had happened is those things were no longer my responsibility. They were no longer my concern. They were no longer my problem. I could focus on only the things that were effectively within my control, and the rest of it would go and be someone else's problem, became external events. I would have more time to focus on developing my junior colleagues, to get them into a place where they needed to be. And maybe instead of working 10, 12, 14 hours a day, I would be able to put in concerted work on the things that mattered to me, on the things that I could change, and then take back some of my own time and give it to myself or give it to my family. Summer's coming up. We live in a beautiful place where we have water. Now I don't have to worry about no daddy's at work. No, okay, I've done what I need to do. Daddy can go play now. So what I took from this is one of the principles of wisdom, which is exercising judgment, seeking perspective, practicing humility, and using practical reasoning. I could see that a lot of my suffering was not actually a change in my real circumstances, but where I saw myself in the narrative of my own life. I had told myself that this was my actualization moment. I had told myself this was the culmination of all those things you've been working for so hard for so long. I actually thought in this conversation that this was a terribly negative outcome, but upon reflection, I thought, you know what, this is a huge positive. This essentially becomes I get all the credit for the things that go well, and then I have no stake in the things that don't go well anymore. The Stoic principle here is, as I understand it, I'm no expert. It's called amor fati, love of fate, or living the best of life with what you're given. Sort of silver lining sort of thing. Yeah. So that's what I took from that, and that was a more recent thing that actually sort of triggered this more meta understanding of where all of this fits into the larger playbook.
What I'm hearing there is time and reflection. So going from that heated conversation that you had where you were very upset, the other person was very upset, to taking the weekend and then circling back to the conversation with a different perspective. That's hard. That's difficult to do, right? In the moment, in your brain, your amygdala is firing, you feel under threat, your ego is under attack, you're upset. And what did that actually look like in the time that you took for yourself to sit and process and think and reflect? How did you get to that different perspective, right? And realizing that, oh, maybe it's me, maybe it's how I'm viewing the situation. I'm putting myself mentally in a cage here and how I am viewing the situation. How did you actually get to the other side where you were able to see it in this new light?
Well, I guess reflecting on the framework, Stoicism gets a bad rap as being this emotionless, apathetic, sort of possibly even nihilistic philosophy. It's actually not that at all. It's about understanding and controlling your impulses and having only the emotions that you want to have in that moment. Based on that, another quote that I think of, I think it was Seneca that said, the best recourse to anger is delay. So take time and get away from that thing that triggered you so much. In a lot of ways, just that exercise is enough to distance yourselves from those animal emotions and allow yourself time and opportunity to reflect upon things. So taking time, sleeping on it, taking the weekend and coming back to it was in itself part of the antidote. Some of it was also reflection, having the perspective of my wife who was able to say, you know what, I know that you're really upset about this. I know that it bothers you. I know that this person, I'm really not a big fan of them right now, but consider this. You've been working a lot. You've been really stressed out. You've been, losing sleep about this sort of stuff. And what if actually this is an opportunity instead of a gross negative? So having that ability to reflect with this person who is sort of also bearing the weight to some degree um, was really, really helpful in the broader thing. So I think having a good relationship with your partner, having this like live-in counselor who knows you and knows your own thoughts on things is also a very, very helpful thing.
It's everything. I'm realizing that in this season of life. I want to talk to you more about self actualization. So you thought you got there, right? You're leading teams, you have all this responsibility, you're owning it, and to you, that felt like your self actualization moment. Are you still there? Are we heading towards a different self actualization moment, or do you think once we get there as individuals, like what happens once you get to self actualization, right? It's the top of the pyramid, it's the top of Maslow's hierarchy. My thought is then what? Life isn't just sunshine and rainbows when you get there, right? So talk to me
You
about
do the
that.
Egyptian thing and build a new pyramid. I think it's actually a nice segue into one of my other anecdotes. So, with this setback and this idea of self actualization and thinking that you were ready, thinking that you had reached the peak, I think it reminds me of this other situation. This had happened a little bit earlier in my career where this is another possibly more famous quote. So, this one's from Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, Roman emperor wrote in his Meditations, the impediment to action advances action, what stands in the way becomes the way. This sort of idea that the obstacle itself is your pathway. Overcoming the obstacle allows you to understand and to grow yourself. So I was reflecting on this, where earlier in my path, I had also reached a place where I felt pretty good. I had changed jobs. In part of that, I had gotten a more senior role, felt pretty good, making more money than ever before. It's like, this is a pretty good life. I have a team. I feel like I'm getting respected on my team. I'm getting all these things that I thought I always deserved, right? Um, but when I was transitioning into this position with more responsibility, with more leadership, chance to guide others along their professional path, I'd come to another team that this I had just had my daughter. I wanted to choose work that was closer to home. The commute wasn't going to be so bad. This was definitely in the pre-COVID, pre-work from home sorts of days. So I chose a team that, it was very convenient. I thought I had a lot of growth opportunity. Um, and I was delivering. I was doing what I thought was good. We were building up towards a major, major delivery, very time sensitive, very big, very high profile stuff. And I thought I had shown good growth, good delivery, strong readiness for the next step. I wanted to get promoted. But when I came to my leadership team and said I wanted to go for a promotion, they straight up laughed at me, literally laughed in my face, telling me I was far, far from being ready. So in that moment, I was faced with a choice, react to the shock, this tremendous blow to the ego, this telling of self like you are not where you think you are, in a way that worked against me or for me. So obviously difficult in the moment. Had a chance to calm down, reflect, seek control of emotions. It's not the event itself that matters, but how you react to it. So in that experience, what I took away from this was by showing temperance, so control of emotions, control of your impulses, control of your anger, control of your ego, I was able to turn my initial reaction of, you know what, F this, I'm out, not doing this, into something a bit more helpful. I said, you know what, F you, I'm in, and I'll show you just how ready I am. That became a sort of fire by which whatever my delivery was, whatever my opportunity was before, it became double or triple what it was before to prove to others and to prove to myself I was beyond a shadow of a doubt ready for this. That not just the destination of getting the promotion mattered, but also I'm going to make sure beyond the shadow of a doubt that I have walked this journey to its fullest.
And you got that promotion?
You know what? I did not get the promotion there, but I was able to then leapfrog over to another place where I not only got the promotion, but got a healthier chunk of money along the way. So again, if we're gonna do the amor fati thing, every closed door is a window open.
I appreciate the journey through the four cardinal virtues. So let's get to the fourth one. I want to hear what you have to say about the last cardinal virtue.
This one was a contentious one. This one my wife told me not to do actually. Was
Oh,
very like, oh my God, I can't believe you're gonna do this. Don't do it. But the I thought this was very important. So, relevant quote, I believe, from I think this one was also Marcus Aurelius was, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." So the idea here. So another part of my career, there was a difficult series of months where there were discussions of layoffs, uncertainty at work, which were exacerbated by really bungled communications. We found out in the paper before we found out from our own leadership. And there were some, insensitive leadership comments, like this idea of like, it shouldn't have come out this way, but we still stand by it, inefficiencies, blah, 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 the same stuff that every company talks about. And we were maybe living our own values and like this is what we can this is what we taught clients to do, so obviously we should take our own medicine. It's like that's great, but we're talking about our own people here. We're talking about the people that you consider family and all the other stuff. It wasn't done very well. And in reflection they would agree that this was not done very well, but the lesson still stands. This is what we're doing. So separate of that, there was a very senior leader who had a monthly town hall where anyone in the company could submit a question for consideration, and then if they were selected, you could speak to this very senior leader and some other very senior leaders about your question in front of the entire company. 40,000 people. Anyone who logged in, anyone who saw the recording after, this is a very extremely public forum. So usually these questions are a pretty positive framing, a little bit of pat on the back, cheerleading. How are we going to achieve your vision? How are we going to succeed the best we can in the coming years? But I wanted to ask a different difficult question that weighed on people's mind. Frankly, how can you treat your people like this and expect to retain and attract the best people for our community?
wow. Big
Um,
question.
it was a big question, and I was told, keep your head down, do your work, don't cause, don't
Don't
cause
talk about, yeah, yeah.
yeah, don't talk about it. So just do what you have to do and, stay safe. My wife is obviously very nervous about, what if goes wrong? What if this impact for you? And that's a legitimate concern. I have a family. I have to take care of this. I'm the sole provider at home. So, it's a legitimate concern, but I thought, there are some things that are bigger than us. There are some things you have to have the courage to actually ask the question and say, are you living these values? So, it was about 2 weeks from when I had learned that my question had been selected until when it was eventually going to happen, progressively more nervous, progressively more worried throughout this. So, I mean, I was nervous and I considered backing out, especially on the morning of it. I'm not going to say that it's a conspiracy, but I just surprisingly had technical difficulties that morning. That, I couldn't log in. My computer was acting up. I thought, this
No.
would have made it really easy to not go through with this. Say, my computer didn't work. I was sick. Don't worry about it. But I wanted to use this opportunity to seek some sort of public recourse for a lot of the pains myself and my colleagues had been facing. So this question, for better or worse, was saved for last. We had the cheerleading, we had the rah rahs all before all this, and then my question was last. And it was a difficult and contentious conversation. Like it was absolutely not the sort of conversation that the senior leader was probably hoping for, on a
Mm.
Friday morning. But afterwards, and I held my ground. There was some pushback. There was other senior people saying, "Well, you got to think about this. You got to concern about this."
Mhm.
And I said, I really appreciate your perspective, but I want to add some other examples. Like, how are you going to defend the situation? And it was a real conversation, and we had follow-on conversations and stuff like that afterwards. But once we got off the phone, once we got off this forum, I had 50 people reach out to me afterwards. Some of them I knew, a lot of them I didn't, to thank me for bravely, using these hard questions that had weighed so heavily on their shoulders. There were a lot of people I didn't know who were feeling the exact same fear and uncertainty that I was. And it felt important to put that out there and say, how are we living the values that you yourself say that we should be following? How are you going to implement the strategy of what you want to achieve when you're necessarily kneecapping your people at the same time? Just tell me, lead. So, fourth cardinal virtue, as you probably already guessed, is this feeling of justice,
Mm-hmm.
aspiring for fairness, honesty, integrity, and concern and obligation for others.
Mm-hmm.
Is vital to living an ethical life inside and outside of our careers. If our careers are meant to be a reflection of ourselves, then we should be living ethically in how we show up there as well.
I want to hear a little bit more about how you communicated your message in a way that landed and would be heard, right? I think that that's the challenge when you have to communicate something difficult that is not going to feel great to hear, right? Especially as a leader. I imagine
Yeah.
they were probably feeling defensive, had their ego under attack in the moment. Um, no one wants to feel like they're a bad leader, right? Or be made aware of so publicly that there's room for improvement. So I'm wondering how you handled communicating your message in a way that would actually land and not just fall on deaf, defensive ears.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid question, and I think one thing that you mentioned is something that's very important for me as a leader to remember, sort of a tactical thing. To say these things publicly, we like to say that you should praise in public and you should criticize in private. Um, these leaders did not necessarily give themselves an avenue for being criticized in private, which meant that they almost necessarily had to be criticized in public, which itself is not a good recipe for problem solving or for ego maintenance and that sort of stuff. So there was a valid criticism that maybe this was not the forum to have this conversation, but then I would counter and say there was no other forum available. And if you don't allow for that honest discussion in private, then you're necessarily going to have to allow for it in public. And, take from that what you may. So I will say that it was not necessarily well received in the moment. I will say that, strangely enough, coincidentally or not, that was the last one of these town halls that ever happened. And then every other time was in a different format, less live, less recorded, less conspicuous. So I'm not saying that I had a direct influence in that, but it just happened to be that afterwards that forum was no longer available. So take from that what you may. But I don't necessarily know whether it was received well or not. I will say that in subsequent conversations I've had with other leaders, especially ones where I felt like something had gone wrong, I think the way of managing up or asking for accountability is to frame it in a inquisitive, caring, empathetic point of view. Leaders are people. They have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. They have 500 balls they're juggling at one time, and it's not necessarily that your issue is the primary issue that they're concerned with at that time. So come to it with a degree of empathy and compassion for them as a human, and frame it as I understand it, these are our common goals. As I understand it, this is your objective for how an organization should be run effectively. What I have noticed is X, Y, and Z, which do not seem to reflect those goals and don't necessarily help us drive in that direction. Can you help me understand how these circumstances are in keeping with our goals? And if they're not in keeping with our goals, how do we change them so we can attain our common vision?
I appreciate that concrete example of literally the words that you need to say in that moment. And the HMU, that's what I default to in my mind is HMU, help me understand, right? Instead of opening with why, right? Because in your mind, you're screaming why, but why, right? But using different language to get to the why, right? And to understand each other. Everyone just wants to feel understood, right?
Absolutely.
Um, I'm thinking about, okay, so the meta what I'm seeing as the meta lucid moment, and correct me if I'm wrong or add here, is really living your values and living your virtues, right? So for you, it's the four Stoic cardinal virtues. I'm curious how you came to Stoicism and Greek philosophy in general.
I think where we are right now, people are probably looking for answers. People are trying to find something that helps them navigate the challenges of everyday life and in the micro picture of their homes and their macro picture of life in general. I think that for any number of reasons, traditional religion has not been the answer for some. So Stoicism is not a religion, it's a philosophy. And as a part of that, there are certain parts of it that will be more applicable to how you want to live it. There is no doctrine, there is no dogma, there is no, as far as I'm aware, no central authority that says this is or this isn't. It's a set of principles, it's a set of writings that you can take from. So I find that very liberating. I had, for a long time, I'm a recreational gardener. I like gardening, I like growing, stuff like that. So this phrase of tend your own garden is, instead of focusing on trying to solve the largest problems in life, how do we fix the climate, how do we deal with population growth, how do we deal with water crises, tend your own garden, raise your own family to be good people. And if everyone does that, then the world will be full of good people. If you can reduce your own carbon footprint, that will be part of the larger picture. If you can, conserve your own water usage, that would be part of the larger picture. You should absolutely advocate for the things that are beyond you. That is your obligation. That is your justice to others. But in terms of what you can control, focus on the things that you can have an absolute concrete impact on. If I walk in and turn off a light, then that is something I can do. I can tell other people it would be good if you would do those things, but I'm not going to go and break into their house and turn off their light for them. So that is part of what brought me to this understanding and this framework of what we do with this. And it can help you also think through. Stoicism is based on internal virtue and less on external outcomes. It's less based on success. It's less based on wealth or reputation or that sort of things. Those things that are mostly out of control, you can have some sort of influence on them. But if you care about your own peace, then knowing what is in your control and letting go of the rest is probably the best recipe for peace I can think of. And I think we all need a little peace these days.
Mm, absolutely. Uh, in talking about peace, how can people, or how have you found peace in such an uncertain time? Or how have you brought peace or a sense of stability and order maybe to your home or to your team in such uncertain times? And we don't have to get to the AI conversation or geopolitical unrest, but just in general, living through uncertain times, through a messy middle, how have you found peace and how can you bring peace to a team if you are a person leading a team?
I think maybe the trite answer is the more things change, the more things stay the same. So we're literally having a discussion about a 2,000-year-old philosophy right now. It was relevant back then and it's still relevant now. There will be different flavors, there will be different shades along the way. I think we do have many different crises in place right now, but if you look at history, there's always been. I don't think there has been a period of time that did not have one crisis or two or three or five or 10. Um, Broadly speaking, we're in the most peaceful time of human history. Doesn't always feel like that, but a careful understanding, reflection of history will show that we're, for worse or worse, we're still doing pretty okay. So I try and say to my team and to my family, regardless of whatever way the wind is blowing, the best thing is to invest in yourself, invest in living these common virtues. If you can become a good person, there's always room for a good person in society rather than going with the flow or like wherever the wind is blowing. I think you'll find that a lot of people right now who have a lot of influence, looking back 10 years ago, they probably didn't. And 10 years from now, I hope to God they don't. And as a result of that, like I think what you'll find is the people who sort of keep the ship afloat and keep things going are the people who exemplify good virtuous conduct and good virtuous character, regardless.
Well, thank you for such a rich conversation and actually getting to see concrete examples of virtues in action. I want to close by asking you to finish the line, because I knew you. So if you've ever seen Wicked, the line is, because I knew you, I have been changed for good. And I want you to think of someone that has touched your life. It could be a stranger, someone who was very close to you, a colleague, and think of them and maybe something that they said or did that changed how you see yourself or how you see the world. And finish the line, because I knew you.
Because I knew you, I think I have become a better person. I look at maybe some of the examples from this and then other examples from life. I think it is, I'd like to end on one final quote that might be a little bit over the top for this specific moment, but again, Marcus Aurelius said, the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. The best thing I learned from some of my leaders is what it took, what a bad leader looked like, or what a difficult leader looked like. And as a result, I wanted to be a good leader. I wanted to be someone that someone wanted to be led by. I wanted to not have a national reputation for being difficult. I wanted to have a national reputation for being the best I could be. And as a result, a lot of identity is innate. A lot of identity comes from self. A lot of identity comes from opposition. Like you identify yourself in opposition to the other. And by looking at role models, both positive and negative, has been a great opportunity for me to really build into the character that I wanted to be, and as a result, build into the character that I hope is a good role model for others, whether they're on my team or in my family. I hope that 50 years from now, my children will look back at me and say, Dad was a good role model because he lived these virtues and, demonstrated what it meant to be a good person in an uncertain world.
Thank you for that, Trey. Until next time, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, bye-bye.